So this is a movie that has gotten so much public, you know, reviews and reports and everything like that. And so the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer was an American theoretical physicist and director of the Manhattan Project, which Los Alamos Laboratory during World War II, and he is often called the father of the atomic bomb. Now, I wish I had an opportunity to be able to see this movie, but Dr. Rod has. So first of all, before we actually really talk about the leadership lessons we can learn from this, Dr. Rod, what was your take on this movie and the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer?
Oh, it was a good movie, no doubt about it. No wonder so many people have watched it. And again, I think I had a look at, I went and had a look at the Rotten Tomatoes website. This was very interesting because the critics and the audiences agreed. 93% rating by the critics, 91% rating by the audiences. So it was a little bit different to Sound of Freedom. But it was a good movie. In other words, it was well directed, well scripted. The actors were just absolutely outstanding. So in and of itself, it was a great movie. Yeah. But of course, I'm smart enough, I guess, to realise that what makes for a good movie is not necessarily in every aspect the reality that occurred.
Yes.
It's interesting because my wife and I, after we saw the movie, we thought we better go and do some research to work out how true it all was. And look, it was pretty true to history.
Yeah.
There wasn't much. The only thing in it which might have been exaggerated was his affair, because although the affair was alleged, it's not certain that he actually had an affair. That he may have been more faithful to his wife than the movie actually represented. But look, apart from that, it was pretty accurate factually. And, I'm old enough to have sort of lived through the Cold War, all the worries that we were going to actually blow up the whole earth with nuclear arsenal and so on. I'm a lot more, I guess, sanguine about it now because I think I understand the biblical point of view. The Bible doesn't tell us that the world is going to end in a nuclear war, so I don't think that's what's going to happen. But one of the, I guess, lasting impressions left of Oppenheimer and some of his colleagues was that this idea that we got the bomb and potentially we can destroy the whole earth and all those who populate it, basically the whole of creation, at least on earth. We've got the capacity to do that, and both the protagonists and antagonists have that capacity, and that should actually be a deterrent to anybody actually using it. And that has proven to be the case up until now. But in his later life, of course, Oppenheimer was probably a little bit less certain about the wisdom of using the bomb in Japan and whether they needed such destructive force to bring Japan to peace negotiations, because they were pretty much on their knees and apparently just about ready to surrender in any case. It's difficult. I've seen some of the interviews he did not long before he died. He died of lung cancer, of course, having been a lifelong smoker. I found his body language in those interviews very, very interesting, and you can find them on YouTube. He very rarely made direct eye contact, so he wasn't making contact with the camera. And most of the time he was his gaze was downwards. And I think that speaks of him being highly introspective. And he must have thought so much about whether or not he'd done the right thing. I don't know whether I can say too much more about it, but it was a good movie, just from, if you like, the entertainment value. But I think that they did a pretty good job in telling the true story of Oppenheimer, bearing in mind, of course, the length of a single movie can never
No.
accurately portray anybody,
Yes.
because you're trying to compress so much of history into such a short period of time.
And make it entertaining.
Well, of course, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And so, yeah, look, like I said, I wanted to kind of talk about this because of the story of Oppenheimer, not necessarily because of the movie. I spent a bit of time researching Oppenheimer himself. I actually came across a reasonably interesting video documentary done by Veritasium. I'll put the link below. It's a science channel, so they were very scientific in their explanation of the journey, and so I thought that was anyone who's looking for a bit of an entertaining, brief overview of his life and his career. It's actually very well put together. One thing that really stood out to me about him was that very thing of you talking about he spent most of his life in pursuit of something. Once he achieved that thing, it almost seemed like he spent the rest of his life fighting against that thing. Like he was, he's the father of the atomic bomb. Like that, he's called the father of the atomic bomb. You say his body language was like, I wonder how much he feels the weight of the responsibility of all of the deaths and all the issues that are caused from this. And I mean, I'll be honest, I thought that Einstein was the creator of the atomic bomb because of what was that movie where he made that? I'm now showing my age, but it was a movie where Einstein plugged his guitar into the atomic bomb to prevent it from blowing up. Do you remember that movie?
And that
I
wasn't
know.
young Einstein, was it?
I think that was it. Yes, I think that
That
was
was
it.
a crazy movie.
I don't know. Not factual at all.
That was a crazy movie.
But like I had been ingrained that I thought that was he was the one that created it. But I obviously Oppenheimer was dubbed the father. That must have a weight. And I suppose the story or the conversation I wanted to have is, what do you do as a leader when you realize what you've created is maybe not bad, but maybe is being used for the wrong thing or has just gotten off track, or, because we can build ministries that can kind of go off the rails, or we can, start a group that is meant to help out a particular cause, but then we find it becomes more activism, and it like goes back to that kind of the woke stuff we were talking about. Like what do we do when we've created something, we've rallied people together, we've invested our time into, put our name to something and built it up, and realize it's not doing the thing it was meant to, or maybe we've had a change of heart and maybe we were actually intending it to be a scam or whatever, like rip people off, or what, I don't know, like maybe our motives was bad and we had a Jesus encounter, and now what do we do now when we realize what we've created is now a monster and we need to fight against it?
Well, Oppenheimer himself became an advocate for non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, which I think was the right thing for him to do, given that he had, as it were, some misgivings about the whole project in the end. But of course, at the time, the world was in the grip of war. It was we may, I guess these days, much of the memory has now died out because there are not too many people who were directly involved in the war who are alive today, and many of those will be very elderly now.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of concerns about where that war was going to end. And of course, look, I'm not an expert. There's hardly any point in me getting involved in a debate about whether or not America should have used the bomb at all, or whether they should have dropped a second bomb. we could argue forever and still not really come to a satisfactory conclusion. But I think you have to be guided by conscience. As Christians, of course, we believe that the law of God is written on our hearts, and that's expressed in terms of our conscience, and we really have to be true to our conscience. If we've done something that leads to evil, then we need to repent of it, and if we're able to make amends, then we should do that. And if making amends means changing public policy, then so be it.
Yep.
And certainly someone of his influence was able to do that. Of course, some of the scenes in the movie make much of the fact that he had his security clearance removed, and the motivation for that in the movie appeared to be jealousy. In real life, I think there were some genuine concerns about his communist sympathies.
Yep.
And look, at that time during the Second World War and not long after, a lot of the world's intellects were greatly attracted to dictatorial regimes.
Yeah.
And look, some intellects really have the view that most of us really aren't equipped intellectually to even vote, and they'd rather
Yes.
not. And John Maynard Keynes was famous for saying that the ordinary person shouldn't have the vote. It should be, the intellects who determine who should run the country. And I think people of great intellectual gifting often lean that way because they don't have confidence that the rest of us can make good choices. And so he wasn't alone in expressing some admiration for those strong leaders that tend to emerge in socialist and communist countries. So there was probably some substance in those hearings that eventually led to his security clearance being withdrawn. But
do you think that part of it would have been political, because now he's like America have now got these big powerful weapons, and now this person now speaking against him is like, oh, let's shut him up because we're
the president he wasn't about to walk away from further development, and he supported the development of the H bomb, which was far more powerful than the A bomb.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you see this kind of technology has led to modern nuclear power stations.
Yes.
So the technology or the theory, quantum mechanics and so on, has actually been used to produce something which is good as well.
Yes.
And this is one of the great difficulties with technology, because technology in the hands of evil people will be used for evil purposes.
Yes.
And what we're seeing before us right now, okay, we're not working through so much the issues of this emerging nuclear technology, but what we're doing right now actually is working through all of the issues associated with AI, artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And again, that's something which can be used for great good, but it could also be used for great evil.
Yes.
And, where's it going to end? We don't know. We don't know whether it will ultimately be used for evil or ultimately be used for good. So will it be used to control people like us? Or will it be used to save lives, for example?
Yeah.
So we're facing exactly the same kind of moral dilemmas as people like Oppenheimer faced more than a generation ago.
So how do we as leaders walk that line? How do we walk that line between, Oppenheimer, he created something and he realized it had kind of gotten out of control and was, not going down the path that he believed. And so now he's fighting against it. But him fighting against it caused him to, let's say, contributed to him losing everything he'd worked for. He was now trying to fight against the very thing he created. How do we make that decision? How do we have that revelation? How do we then execute on that?
Well, if you're guided by conscience, then you really got to let the results fall as they will.
Yeah.
And that's easy to say, of course. I'm not an Oppenheimer. I've never been in that kind of position. I'm not one of those who's creating AI, so I don't really have the same kind of conscience issues that they might have.
Yeah.
But so much technology can be used for good or for evil.
Mm-hmm.
and a lot depends on who's in control. And these are incredibly difficult areas for us to navigate as leaders. These days, if you're a leader in a business, for example, one of the decisions you need to be making now is the extent to which you're going to use AI in your own business. Just last week here on the Gold Coast, our Australian Institute of Company Directors actually had a briefing on AI for directors. So this is something which is being discussed in boardrooms virtually as you and I speak today. And a lot of the discussion turns on the issues of the use of this technology. Will it be used to contribute something positive to human flourishing, or will it ultimately be used to the detriment of those who don't have power?
Yeah. Follow your conscience. Ultimately be led by the Holy Spirit. I think that's probably what I would say out of this is whatever you're working on, make sure you're not getting a check in your spirit about, is this the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do if we need a shift? Don't be afraid to make a stand as a leader against the very thing that you built. Don't continue on because it's just that thing, because I created it, so I've got to keep it going. If you're getting a check in the spirit that it's not the right thing, then I suppose that's there's a movie about him now many years later. He made a massive impact ultimately to fight against what he created. And so it may not be an easy decision, but if you feel like something that you've created is not doing the right thing, then it's our job, our responsibility as leaders to then do, as Dr. Rod said, fight for what can advance people, what can help us improve and grow, because that's our job as leaders, to make sure people are all growing and improving and developing, the flourishing, that was the word that you used, the flourishing of humanity. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.